Well, good afternoon, everybody. For the next session of Putting Democracy on the Couch. It's a pleasure to be here in Copenhagen, my first time in town. And let me introduce these two, before I introduce these two young women. I mean, democracy, as we know, has very similar essential components to it, but every context is different. I think we got a sense of that. I think everyone here knows that. We got a sense of that in the previous conversation. But I think the elements that are represented by Tunisia and Burma, otherwise known as Myanmar, are particularly salient. They're two countries that I feel very passionate about in a way. I was ambassador in Myanmar for just about 4 years and worked on it for about 5. And I just came from Tunisia last week with my board. We took Madeleine Albright and others from my board to Tunisia and had a wonderful 3 days. It's my second time in my first 10 months on the job. So I think this is really a timely a moment to discuss about the context, and it's particularly useful to have two accomplished young women to be discussing this. And I'd like to discuss that aspect in your context as well. But very briefly, let me introduce them. First, here to my right is Hsu Mon Aung, who is an accomplished democratic practitioner in her native Myanmar. She was co-founder of the Public Alliance for Democracy in 2014 and of Pandita Development Institute. She worked in several capacities on governance, media, and communications with the Danish Institute for Parties and Democracy. And she has served as a journalist and community organizer, assisting with civic education, voter education, and leadership development, and has spent time as a scholar at the Bush Institute's Leadership and Liberty Forum. Currently serves as a program officer, senior program officer for IRI's Myanmar office. They pair me up, it's okay. I won't rough her up. We're all in this together. We talk about unity. And Siwar Douss from Tunisia has a background in business administration, but has been mainly involved in communications and project management, been dedicated to civil society work, particularly the integration of youth in professional life, and particularly women, entrepreneurship, and open data, and has been a mentee in the Women Initiative Fellowship in the United States. Okay, let's turn to this quickly. And now, we don't have a lot of time, unfortunately, for the conversation, but let me hear from both of you what democracy means for you. How did you sort of confront, you both come from countries when you probably grew up 10 years ago, shorter for many of you. I mean, democracy was just a pipe dream, was a desire. How has democracy shaped your life, and how did you come to understand democracy in your countries?
Hsu Mon Aung. For me, in my life, democracy is very strange. I would say democracy is very strange because we don't get a chance to talk about the democracy because of the anti-military governments. So, but I want to know about what the democracy is, because I know that most of the freedoms and equal rights are in the meanings of the democracy. That is my definition, and freedoms and equal rights is the democracy. Yeah, and then. After I graduated from the university in 2005, I decided to learn and to import in the democracy transition. So that's why I decided to work as a journalist in local newspaper. At the time, as our Myanmar community, we have a very limited chance to import in the democratic transition. So as the local journalists, we fight for a lot democratic transition, and then we have been helping our peoples begin our periods of social, economics, and politics activities happening around the country. So, and then we were fighting for media freedoms, because it is press freedom is very important and essential role in democracy. So maybe during 10 years old, over 10 years old, I involved in the democracy. It's a lot of story. In 2010, I'm a founder member of the Pandita Development Institute. That institute intends to develop the voter education. Maybe for our Myanmars, democratic election is very new for our people. They don't know how much important the democratic election is. So our program can support Myanmar people to involve in the democratic elections. So after that, I considered, after 2050 elections, will be the government and the elected governments. So that's why I decided, after elected governments, maybe the MP representative came from the political parties, we have to support the legislatures. So I decided to establish a public alliance for democracy to support strengthening the legislatures.
Right.
Yeah, and then in 2015 August, I joined DIPD, the Institute for Parties and Democracy, which is based in Copenhagen, but I work in the Myanmar program. I work as a media and communication coordinator at that organization. The organization inspires multi-dialogue culture to our political parties. I got a chance to involve in the municipal legal reform process in Myanmar, and and that is to develop free and fair local election. We have not much local election in Myanmar, as you know. Yeah. And then this year, in March, I decided to move II, because II also support a lot of our representative institution, political parties, and CSO through public opinion poll, workshop, and consultation. I be a part of teams to launch policymakers to address their citizen concerns. So that is my way to involve in the democracy in my country.
Okay, thank you. We can talk further about some of those themes. But Siwar, from your context.
From my context, okay. So I think that democracy was definitely a dream. I have to say, when growing up, I didn't even know what was it, honestly. But I was very fortunate to witness the revolution in 2011 while I'm in my 20s. It was a good thing and a bad thing, to be honest. First of all, because it was very dreamy. So like young people like myself and a lot of us, like they had like this imagination that the country would like be transformed in like a very quick time. But then again, also all the attention from the world Tunisia has witnessed was also a lot of pressure on the country itself, because everyone was like waiting, oh, this is the model that would work in like 5 steps. So it was really hard. But what I would say that for my work, I work in I work in civil society, which was like a choice that I made to contribute, like from my side, in the democratic transition in my country. I work mainly with youth, and I really love working with women as well, because I feel like women in Tunisia, in particular, they are very, like they are leading the way, but implicitly. So it's not like the spotlight is not there. They're not being well represented in political situation, but they are the ones who are working really hard. So I really want to help women, youth, and especially women, to have their voices heard. Like democracy for me is freedom. Democracy for me is to exist the way I like to exist, without being judged or without being without any like problems with it. Like if I'm different, I am different, and I should exist in this space because it's a common space. We know that in Tunisia we are progressive compared to other Arab countries, and we're very grateful to have that context, like honestly. But at the same time, we have a lot of differences within, and this synergy and this like existing with the differences is always not like told, but it's really hard to accept others in general. So yeah, that's my experience.
Well, Siwa, thank you for that. You mentioned one thing very interesting. You said the dream of democracy, and then the reality comes. I think we both had that situation where tremendous moments of change, and there's a kind of euphoria. But democracy is hard. I mean, to actually create, as Dan talked earlier about the culture of democracy, the mindset of democracy comes much slower than the institutions or processes even. So the dream then ends up to be a very prosaic day-to-day kind of existence of trying to create democracy and finding challenges. Can you talk about your experience confronting the dream versus the reality? Talk about the challenges, but also just generally how you have addressed that, how you've coped with the dream versus reality of democracy. Hsu Mon Aung.
So, well, in our country, there's a lot of challenge to democracy in Myanmar. So, longest running civil war, maybe more than 60 years, and equality and equal right, and there's a lot of religious conflicts, and then poverty, and so on. A lot of issue happens because we are very, infant state democracy. So, and I would like to point out poverty. Poverty is the main challenge for our countries. As we all know that our country is the poorest countries around the world, in the world. But according to the Asian Development Bank reports, around 33% of citizens live maybe under the national poverty lines. Yeah, our average.
A third of the population. That's remote.
Yeah, most of, 33% of the population lives. Yeah, and estimated maybe average income is 2 to 3 a day, or maybe around $1,000 US per year. Can we imagine that our people live on that little amount of the money? So, political instabilities, weak government institutions, corruptions cause the main cause of the poverty in Myanmar. Yeah. So nowadays, people have lots in trucks in the democracy because of poverty. So all the people, all the populations, the South, maybe greater accountability, transparency from their officials, right? That's why I want to mention that poverty is the biggest challenge for our country.
Yes, thank you. Simo.
From the context I come from, I think one of the most important things is the culture of democracy, I think. For a country that only had 2 presidents since 1956 to 2011, I cannot even compare it with any other country because I would be very embarrassed. But since 2011, now we had like 4 presidents, and we're having elections soon in November 2019. We have a lot of milestones to actually be proud of. This is something that we should really acknowledge. In short time, there's a lot of good things that happened. But again, we have a lot of attention, everyone is waiting for Tunisia to succeed, to say, yeah, this is going to work. So this is really, really hard to apply it within communities where people don't know what democracy is. And the government it has a lot of issues that's working on. It cannot really work on that as well. So it's mainly the work of civil society, which I'm being involved in. I work now, like within the communities, the very vulnerable communities where I work, you can find people who are actually just waiting for things to happen, and they don't really differentiate between their rights and their duties. So this is something really critical. Right. So when you say democracy, yes, you say freedom, but at the same time, there are a lot of duties that you need to be doing and to respect. This is something that people are still struggling with, and it's going to take more time than citizens themselves, or people, Tunisians, are expecting. Because everyone was very impatient when the revolution took place, and they were like, it's going to happen now. But then I'm sure it's going to take longer, and we just need to accept it. We just need to accept it. Other challenges, we have security, context security issues, challenges, because it comes from the neighbors where we come, like geographically, the situation in Libya is not very stable. So anything that happens, also now Algeria, anything happens, Tunisia is not really in a place to be secure. So we have also the return of extremists from Syria. These are challenges that we're dealing with. We have also, so challenges are really like several challenges to this, but when we look again to the laws that are now written, which are really one of the best in the world, of course, theory and practices are different. I'm going to be realistic here, but we need to make first steps for other steps to follow. We're definitely way better off, and we're getting there. But the transition is really harder than anyone is expecting, and it's going to take longer than anyone would expect as well.
Right. And just to let folks know, if you hadn't seen the news, that this morning there were 2 suicide bombers in Tunis. Yes. So It was remarkable being there to get a sense of the geography, which is a small country surrounded by Algeria on one side, Libya on the other, where Libya, we all know, is broken up into parts, and then the extremist threat along the border. It's a very tenuous, and of course, Myanmar, I used to say, was 54 million people surrounded by 3 billion. So that vulnerability, that sense of vulnerability to outsiders is very much ingrained in the psychology, I think, of both countries, of being a small, sort of trying so hard, but the pressures from without are so intense. We can talk more about that. I can't let you go without asking about being young women in these environments. As you say, there's somewhat more progressive cultures, and certainly in the Constitution is the first to have equality for women in the Middle East. But there are obviously challenges in other respects in terms of culture. Talk to me about being a young woman doing this work in this environment and the challenges of that.
For me, in my family, I have not much challenge since I was young, being a woman. But in the community, as our norms and cultures, we are objects, women are objects. But nowadays, we promote women empowerment programs. Most of their society accept they have to give the chance the woman to live in every society. But in reality, as a woman, we need to more qualify than men to get the place and to live in something. So that is the actual situation in Myanmar. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Well, the context and this question in particular is very interesting for Tunisia, honestly. Tunisia, as I don't know if many of you know, we have we are progressed compared to other Arab countries. The situation for women is, by laws, is by far progressed compared to other countries. Tunisia is a Muslim country as well, so we have a religious background. So I would say the example that is really simple for this is that when you see families, you know that the mother is the one who is leading. This is fact. Like, women are the ones who are working hard. They are the ones who are deciding for their children. They are the ones who decide for the future and everything. To be as a young woman and to work in in vulnerable communities and to work on resilience and to work as a role model as well for other youth, it's very challenging because so the capital is something, and the other regions are something else. It's not really easy to be a young woman working in this position. I have to work at least 10 times more than any man in my position to be considered and to be taken seriously.
Right.
I get all of sorts of discouragement, and I can even get harassed, of course. You know, when I see other women like within the communities, the potential they have, the energy that they have, the dream they have to just, be accepted as any other man, it just gives me a lot of energy to continue working and just to believe again. I'm very happy. I'm very lucky to have people who believe in me, who help me to grow and just advance a couple of steps, even more than other women in my situation would be. I also believe that we lack role models in the country where youth need to be looking up for role models who actually represent them. This is something that is not shown in media, and as a lot of people say it, and I think the journalist who was here from Lebanon was discussing this, that people who are represented and being on the spot, they don't represent anything from what it should be. So we really need to see more women, accomplished women who are actually doing things for the good, to be inspiring other women. In the organization where I work, it's really nice to see, powerful women in the senior management, defending the cases and being all over the place, and it's really good. So that's it gives me a lot of energy to keep forward. But I'm very lucky to be surrounded with a lot of powerful women. Others are not, which just is giving them a lot of hindrances and challenges for them to just, be the people who they are and achieve their potential.
Yeah. Well, you now are role models. I'm sure you may not realize that. You sort of go through a membrane and suddenly you are the people that others look up to and model themselves after. And I think both of your countries are very fortunate in this regard. How much time do we have? 1 minute, 2 minutes. Maybe I'll open it up to the audience. I can keep going, but I'd like to not make this just up here. Does anybody have a question? I could always ask one, but anything anyone has to say? Okay, well, let me just, getting on the women question, just a comment on that, which is I had said when I was ambassador in Myanmar that the women were going to make the difference.
Yeah.
And I've said that repeatedly. And then I didn't realize, as I got to NDI, I realized women are the difference everywhere for democracy.
Yeah.
Because what we've seen in the past generation or 30 years, unfortunately, is maybe new processes, new institutions, with some of the same players playing the same game. So you get very similar results. You have to open the system up. And with young people and women filling that breach, women, every study, and you shouldn't need a study, they're the ones who lead the families. They're the ones who pass along the values within the families, within communities. So it's essential when we think about democracy that we think about opening it up to women and young people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. But again, practice and theories are very different.
Yes.
When you are in a community where they have religious, or they're conservative, let's say, just conservative. So women are just playing two roles. First of all, they are doing the work and they are trying their best to help everyone. But the second thing is that they need to do it silently and implicitly without being noticed, because no one will accept that she is the one who's leading it. So she's doing both things, which is really funny, because I don't know how much women can take. But I always say this. I always say that if they just give governments to mothers, they will just take care of it.
Try something different would be nice. Otherwise, we're getting the same results. A U.S. senator, a female U.S. senator, I just heard, I won't say who it was, apparently has said that, yes, I have to work and be twice as good as a male, which fortunately is not hard. So, which I thought was a very good line. But, okay, I think we are out of time. I am so grateful. The best part of my job, frankly, the thing I was so excited to be part of NDI and return to NDI after about 20, 25 years was to meet people like yourselves who really inspire us. It's not about us inspiring you, but you are role models for the rest of us who are struggling in our own democracies. No one has it perfect. It's always a work in progress. And I just want to thank you for your observations and for your work. So please join me in thanking you.
Thank you, Siwar. Derek, thanks a lot.